The Galactic Academy of Sciences hummed with the quiet efficiency of 1,000 different species pursuing knowledge. Among the towering crystalline beings of Xerion and the gas-wreathed nebulans, Marcus Rivera felt perpetually small. As the first human to be accepted into the Academy's xenobiology program, he carried the weight of his entire species' reputation on his shoulders. Today, we discuss the most dangerous worlds known to galactic civilization, Professor Zethkar announced, his four arms gesturing dramatically as holographic displays materialized around the lecture hall. The Altarian's blue skin shimmered with excitement as he began his favorite topic. Marcus leaned forward in his specially designed seat, notepad ready. Around him, his classmates, beings that had evolved on worlds ranging from frozen methane spheres to plasma-bathed hellscapes, settled in with the casual attention of students everywhere. Let us begin with Kepler 442b, Zethkar continued, manipulating the hologram to show a world of perpetual storms. Surface winds exceeding 500 kilometers per hour. Acid rain that can dissolve most known materials. Lightning strikes every 2.3 seconds on average. A crystalline student raised what might have been a hand. Surely nothing could survive there, Professor? On the contrary, Shardik. The Kepler natives have adapted remarkably. They've developed natural electromagnetic shields and carbide-based exoskeletons. Fascinating creatures, though thankfully contained to their homeworld. Marcus scribbled notes, genuinely impressed. Earth had hurricanes, but nothing like that. Moving on to Proxima Centauri C. Now here is a world that makes Kepler 442b look like a vacation resort. The hologram shifted to show a world split between a molten day side and a frozen night side. Temperatures range from 800 degrees Celsius to minus 200. The transition zone experiences constant seismic activity. Earthquakes measuring 9.0 or higher every few hours. This time it was Vexila, a methane-breathing titan, who spoke up. How do the inhabitants survive such extremes? Remarkable adaptation again. They've developed a form of hibernation that allows them to literally freeze solid during the cold periods and reactivate when temperatures rise. Their cities are built on massive mobile platforms that constantly migrate to stay in the habitable zone. Marcus found himself thinking of Earth's plate tectonics, of San Francisco earthquakes and Himalayan avalanches. Impressive, but he'd seen worse on the evening news. The lecture continued for 2 hours, covering worlds that boiled with radiation, planets where the very air was toxic to most life forms, and moons orbiting so close to gas giants that the tidal forces would rip apart most structures. After class, Marcus gathered his materials and prepared to leave when Professor Zethkar called out to him. Mr. Rivera, a moment please. Marcus approached the professor's desk, noting how Zethkar's forearms allowed him to continue organizing holographic displays while speaking. I'm curious about your thoughts on today's lecture. You seemed subdued. Most students find the discussion of extreme worlds quite exciting. Marcus chose his words carefully. It was fascinating, Professor. I had no idea such diverse worlds existed in the galaxy. Indeed, though I must admit, I'm particularly interested in your perspective as a human. Your species comes from what our surveys indicate is a remarkably stable world. Class M, if I recall correctly, comfortable temperatures, abundant water, stable orbit. Yes, sir. Earth is pretty mild, I suppose. Exactly. Which is why I believe your species will contribute greatly to galactic civilization. Beings from harsh worlds often develop aggressive tendencies, survival instincts that make peaceful cooperation difficult. But humans, evolving in such ideal conditions, should make excellent diplomats and mediators. Marcus nodded politely, though something in his chest tightened at the casual dismissal. I should let you prepare for your next class, Professor. Of course, of course. Oh, and Rivera? Next week we'll be discussing the legendary Death World, a planet so dangerous that it exists only in theoretical models. Most xenobiologists believe such a world could never actually support complex life. I think you'll find it quite interesting from an academic standpoint. Walking back to his dormitory through the Academy's bioluminescent corridors, Marcus couldn't shake a growing unease. Around him, students from dozens of worlds discussed the lecture, each species sharing stories of their own homeworld's unique challenges. The Zirianites spoke of electromagnetic storms that could fry electronics at the molecular level. The Nebulans described atmospheric pressures that would crush most beings instantly. Even the seemingly fragile gossamer folk from the low-gravity worlds had evolved to survive in near-vacuum conditions. And Earth was just mild, stable, safe. Marcus thought of tornadoes ripping through Oklahoma, of tsunamis swallowing entire coastlines, of volcanic eruptions that could alter global weather patterns. He thought of hurricanes, blizzards, earthquakes, and the simple daily battle every living thing on Earth fought just to survive another day. But here, surrounded by beings from worlds that made Earth look like a garden paradise, he kept his mouth shut. Better to be underestimated than to seem like he was exaggerating his homeworld's dangers. Still, as he settled into his dormitory that night, Marcus couldn't help but wonder what his classmates would think if they knew the truth about the mild world that had forged humanity. The next week's lecture drew an even larger crowd than usual. Word had spread through the academy about Professor Zethkar's promised discussion of the theoretical death world, and students from other departments had squeezed into the hall. Marcus found himself surrounded by excited chatter in a dozen different languages and communication methods. Settle, Professor Zethkar called, his forearms raised for attention. I see we have many visitors today. Welcome all. Now, before we begin, I must stress that what we're discussing today is purely theoretical. No such world could actually exist in nature. A holographic display materialized, showing a blue and green sphere rotating slowly in space. It looked oddly familiar to Marcus, though the continents were clearly fictional. Behold, the theoretical death world, Zethkar announced with dramatic flair. A planet so hostile to life that it exists only in our worst nightmares and most extreme mathematical models. The professor began manipulating the display, zooming in on various features. First, let us consider the gravitational anomaly. This world would need to be large enough to maintain a dense atmosphere, yet small enough to avoid crushing most life forms. The theoretical gravity would be approximately 9.8 meters per second squared, nearly enough to pin most spacefaring species to the ground permanently. Marcus felt his pen still in his hand as he processed that information. Around him, students gasped and shuddered at the thought of such crushing gravity. But gravity is merely the beginning, Zethkar continued, warming to his subject. This death world would be tilted at a severe angle, perhaps 23 degrees, causing massive seasonal variations across most of the planet. Imagine temperatures swinging by 40 or 50 degrees as the world careened through its orbit. A nebular student's gas form flickered with distress. Surely no ecosystem could adapt to such chaos? Precisely the point, Wispera. But it gets worse. Much worse. The display zoomed in on the planet's surface. This world would be covered with a substance we might call dihydrogen monoxide. A compound so reactive that it dissolves most materials given time, yet so essential that life would somehow need to be composed primarily of it. The lecture hall erupted in disturbed murmurs. Marcus gripped his pen tighter. This water, as we'll call it, would exist in 3 phases simultaneously across the planet. Solid at the poles, causing massive ice sheets kilometers thick. Liquid across temperate zones, creating vast, unpredictable oceans, and gaseous in the atmosphere, causing chaotic weather patterns. Zethkar manipulated the display to show swirling atmospheric patterns. The weather on this death world would be beyond violent. Massive cyclonic storms, hurricanes, with winds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour, rotating columns of air, tornadoes that could level entire settlements in minutes. Electrical storms striking thousands of times per day. Marcus's mouth had gone completely dry. Around him, students were expressing genuine horror at the theoretical conditions. But surely, interrupted Clickstar, an insectoid hive being, if such storms were constant, life could adapt? Find shelter. Ah, but you see, the storms would be unpredictable. No pattern, no safe seasons. A creature might experience perfect weather one day and a killing freeze the next. And that's not even considering the seismic activity. The hologram shifted to show the planet's crust in cross-section. This theoretical world would be geologically unstable. Massive tectonic plates constantly grinding against each other, causing earthquakes, sudden violent movements of the entire surface, and volcanoes, mountains that could literally explode without warning, spewing molten rock and toxic gases across hundreds of kilometers. A chorus of horrified clicks and whistles rose from the assembled students. Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the Academy's climate control. The theoretical atmosphere would be a mixture of nitrogen and oxygen, both highly reactive gases. The oxygen alone would be so corrosive that it would cause rapid aging in most tissue types. Essentially, every breath would be slowly poisoning any hypothetical inhabitants. Professor Zethkar paused dramatically, letting that sink in. And the radiation. This death world would orbit a Class G star at such close range that massive amounts of deadly radiation would constantly bombard the surface. Any life would need elaborate chemical defenses just to avoid cellular breakdown from the star's energy. Marcus thought of summer days at the beach, of sunscreen and sunglasses, of skin cancer warnings. His hands were trembling slightly now. But perhaps most terrifying of all would be the other life forms. In order for complex life to evolve on such a world, it would need to be incredibly aggressive, adaptable, and resilient. We're talking about creatures that could survive crushing gravity, toxic atmosphere, extreme weather, seismic activity, and deadly radiation. The hologram showed theoretical creatures. Some looked remarkably like Earth animals, Marcus noted with growing alarm. These theoretical death world organisms would be unlike anything else in the galaxy. Predators capable of chasing prey for hours without tiring. Pack hunters with sophisticated communication and tool use. Creatures that could heal from injuries that would kill most galactic species. A crystalline student raised an appendage. Professor, surely such aggressive creatures would destroy each other? Competition would be too fierce. An excellent point, Shardik. Which brings us to the most terrifying theoretical aspect: cooperation. These death world creatures would need to be capable of both extreme violence and complex social behavior. Imagine beings that could switch from peaceful cooperation to deadly combat in seconds. Marcus was gripping his pen so hard he was afraid it might break. Every eye in the lecture hall was wide with fascination and horror. The theoretical dominant species of such a world would be the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Adaptable enough to survive anywhere, aggressive enough to overcome any obstacle, and intelligent enough to turn any environment to their advantage. Thankfully, such a world is purely theoretical. The professor began shutting down the holographic displays. Questions? Yes, Vexila? Professor, in your theoretical model, what would you call such creatures? The hypothetical dominant species. Zethkar's forearms spread in a gesture of dramatic imagination. Oh, I don't know. Given their theoretical nature, perhaps something simple. Humans, maybe? From the theoretical root meaning of the Earth? The lecture hall erupted in appreciative clicks and whistles at the professor's creativity. Marcus sat perfectly still, his face pale, as his classmates discussed the fascinating theoretical impossibility of his entire species. As the lecture ended, Marcus remained seated until the hall had mostly emptied, then slowly gathered his materials. Rivera, Professor Zethkar called out. I noticed you were particularly quiet today. I hope you found the theoretical discussion interesting. Marcus looked up at his professor, this being who had just described Marcus's entire civilization as a theoretical impossibility. Very interesting, Professor, Marcus managed. Quite educational. Excellent. I do hope it gives you an appreciation for how fortunate your species is to come from such a peaceful, stable world. Can you imagine actually trying to survive on the death world I described? Marcus thought of his grandmother, who had lived through the London Blitz and still tended her garden until she died at 97. He thought of his brother Miguel, a search and rescue worker who routinely rappelled down cliff faces in storms. He thought of his own childhood, playing in snow that could kill an unprotected human in minutes. No, sir, Marcus said quietly. I can't imagine. But as he walked back to his dormitory, Marcus was beginning to suspect that his education at the Galactic Academy was about to become far more interesting than anyone had planned. 3 weeks had passed since the Death World lecture, and Marcus had barely slept. Every conversation with his classmates reinforced the same terrifying truth. Earth wasn't just similar to the theoretical Death World Professor Zethkar had described. It was exactly the Death World. Every detail, every impossible characteristic, every theoretical nightmare scenario was just Tuesday on Earth. The breaking point came during a casual discussion in the Academy's communal dining area. Marcus sat with his usual group. Clickstar from the Hive Worlds, Vexila from Titan's Methane Seas, Whispera the Nebular, and Shardik from the Crystal Caverns of Zirian Prime. I still can't get over last month's lecture, Vexila was saying, her breathing apparatus creating small puffs of methane vapor. The idea of creatures living in such violent conditions, it's like something from a horror story. The gravity alone would be impossible, Clickstar agreed, his compound eyes reflecting the ambient light. 8 meters per second squared? My carapace would crack under such pressure. Whispera's gaseous form flickered thoughtfully. I keep thinking about the atmospheric composition. 21% oxygen? That's not air, that's a combustion accelerant. One spark and everything would burst into flames. Marcus pushed his food around his plate, trying to look casual. It's just theoretical, right? No such world actually exists. Thank the void for that, Shardik chimed in, her crystalline structure resonating with emphasis. Can you imagine meeting creatures from such a place? They'd be absolute monsters, built to survive anything, capable of incredible violence, probably unable to feel pain properly since they'd need to function while injured. The professor mentioned they'd be pack hunters, Clickstar added. Coordinated, tool-using, and aggressive. Honestly, they'd probably try to conquer the entire galaxy if they ever developed space travel. Marcus set down his utensil carefully. That seems extreme. Maybe they'd be peaceful? Happy to just explore and learn. The entire table turned to stare at him. Vexila's breathing apparatus actually stopped cycling for a moment. Rivera, she said slowly. We're talking about creatures that would have evolved under constant threat of death. Every single day would be a battle for survival against crushing gravity, toxic atmosphere, predators, natural disasters, and deadly radiation. What part of that evolutionary pressure would create peaceful beings? They'd have to be hyper-aggressive just to reach adulthood, Whispera agreed, and incredibly paranoid, always expecting attack, always ready to fight or flee. Plus the environmental adaptation, Shardik added. Beings that could survive being frozen solid, then heated to dangerous temperatures, then poisoned by their own atmosphere. They'd be nearly immortal by galactic standards. Marcus felt his chest tightening. But surely intelligence would moderate those instincts, make them more diplomatic. Clickstar's antenna twitched in what Marcus had learned was the hive equivalent of sardonic laughter. Intelligence that evolved under those conditions? Rivera, you're talking about minds shaped by constant warfare against their own planet. They'd probably see every interaction as a potential threat, every negotiation as a battle to be won. The scary part, Vexila continued, is that they'd probably be really good at hiding it. Natural selection would favor the ones who could appear harmless while planning an attack. Deception would be a survival trait. Marcus stood up abruptly. I need to get to the library. Research project. The Academy's observation deck was usually empty at this hour. Marcus stood at the massive transparent barrier, looking out at the space station's view of the local star system. He pulled out his personal communicator and began searching for every reference to Earth in the galactic records. What he found made his blood run cold. Earth, Sol 3, classification. Uncontacted pre-spaceflight civilization. Preliminary survey. Class M Death World quarantine recommended. Survey notes. Extreme gravitational anomaly, 9.81 meters per square second. Toxic atmospheric composition, 21% O2. Severe axial tilt causing seasonal extremes, unstable geology, Frequent severe weather events. Presence of primitive sapient species confirmed but deemed impossible, likely sensor error. Recommend no contact until species achieves interstellar capability and demonstrates survival off-world. Estimated probability of successful sapient evolution, 0.00001%. Estimated probability of achieving spaceflight, 0%. Status: monitoring only. Do not approach. Marcus stared at the screen, reading the entry 3 times. The Galactic Federation had surveyed Earth. They'd seen humans, and they'd classified his entire species as a sensor error because the idea of complex life on Earth was literally unthinkable. Rivera. Marcus spun around to find Professor Zethkar approaching, his forearms carrying a tray of crystalline nutrient supplements. Professor, I didn't hear you come in. The observation deck is one of my favorite spots for evening meals, Zethkar said, settling his large frame next to Marcus. The view helps put things in perspective. You seemed distressed at dinner. Clickstar mentioned you left suddenly. Marcus gestured vaguely at the stars. Just thinking about the Death World lecture. It's stuck with me. Ah yes, fascinating theoretical work, isn't it? I've been refining the model since that lecture, adding more impossible details. Zethkar activated his own display unit. For instance, I've calculated that such a world might have multiple massive satellites, moons, that would create tidal forces strong enough to move entire oceans twice daily. Marcus closed his eyes. That sounds intense. Oh, it gets better. The theoretical creatures would have to adapt to these constant changes in their environment. Imagine beaches that disappear and reappear every 12 hours, coastal areas that flood regularly, ecosystems that depend on this constant chaos. Professor, Marcus said carefully, what if such a world actually existed? Zethkar's forearms gestured dismissively. Impossible, my dear Rivera. The mathematical models are quite clear. No sapient species could evolve under such conditions. Even if they did, they'd never develop spaceflight. The resource expenditure required to escape such a gravity well, combined with the constant environmental pressures. No, it's simply not feasible. But hypothetically, even hypothetically, such creatures would be unlike anything else in the galaxy. They'd be the most dangerous beings imaginable. Probably best that it remains theoretical. Marcus nodded slowly. Probably best. They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the stars. Finally, Zethkar gathered his things to leave. Rivera, a word of advice. Don't let theoretical scenarios trouble you too much. Focus on the real galaxy, with its real challenges and real opportunities. Leave the impossible worlds to imagination. As his professor left, Marcus remained at the observation deck, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth continued its violent rotation, his family and friends dealing with weather that would terrify his classmates, living through disasters that would be considered impossible by galactic standards, and somehow calling it normal. And here he was, the first human in galactic civilization, learning that his species was classified as a theoretical impossibility by the very beings who were teaching him about the universe. Marcus pulled out his communicator again and activated the recording function. Personal log, Marcus Rivera, Galactic Academy student ID 7742 Delta. I need to figure out how to tell the galaxy that humans are real, that Earth exists, and that we're not the monsters they think we would be. He paused, thinking about his grandmother surviving the Blitz, about his brother rappelling down cliffs in storms, about every human who had ever lived through a hurricane, earthquake, blizzard, or just a normal Tuesday morning commute. Or maybe, he continued slowly, I need to figure out how to prove that we're not monsters, without proving that we absolutely are. The stars offered no answers, but Marcus had the uncomfortable feeling that he was about to find out exactly what kind of reputation humanity was going to build in the wider galaxy. Marcus had been debating his next move for 2 weeks when the decision was made for him. During advanced xenobiology, Professor Zethkar announced a practical exercise that made Marcus's stomach drop. Students, I'm pleased to announce that the Academy has acquired survival simulation chambers for our theoretical death world studies. Zethkar's forearms gestured enthusiastically. We'll be testing how various galactic species might hypothetically survive on the impossible world we've been discussing. The lecture hall buzzed with excited chatter. Marcus felt like he was going to be sick. Now, naturally, we'll be using heavily modified conditions. The professor continued. Even at 1% of theoretical death world parameters, these simulations will be quite challenging. We'll test gravity, atmospheric composition, weather patterns, and basic survival scenarios. Clickstar raised a chitinous appendage. Professor, what safety measures will be in place? Excellent question. Full medical teams, emergency teleportation, and automatic abort protocols. Even so, I expect most species will reach their limits within minutes. The point is to demonstrate why the death world remains theoretical. No evolved being could actually survive there. Marcus raised his hand slowly. Professor, will all students be participating? Of course, Rivera. Though given your species' evolution on such a stable world, you may find it particularly challenging. Don't worry. No one expects humans to last long in such conditions. After class, Marcus walked in a daze toward his dormitory. This was it. The moment his carefully maintained secret would be exposed. There was no way to fake being overwhelmed by conditions that were literally weaker than a normal day on Earth. Rivera, wait up! Marcus turned to find his study group approaching. Vexila's methane-breathing apparatus was cycling rapidly with excitement. Can you believe we get to experience the Death World simulation? She bubbled. I mean, it'll be terrifying, but what a learning opportunity. I'm actually nervous, Shardik admitted, her crystalline structure flickering with anxiety. Even at reduced parameters, the conditions will be extreme by any reasonable standard. The gravity alone will be challenging, Clickstar added. Even at 1% of theoretical death world levels, we're talking about nearly 0.1 meters per second squared above standard. Marcus did quick math in his head. If they were reducing Earth's gravity by 99%, that meant the simulation would run at approximately 0.098 meters per square second above galactic standard. Still stronger than what his classmates were used to, but barely noticeable to a human. I'm sure we'll all do our best, Marcus managed. Oh, Rivera. Whispera's gaseous form shimmered sympathetically. Don't feel bad if you don't last long. Honestly, none of us expect to survive more than a few minutes. The important thing is the learning experience. That night, Marcus lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He could back out, claim illness, find some excuse, but then he'd just face the same problem later, and his odd behavior was already drawing attention. Or he could participate and try to hide his capabilities, pretend to struggle with conditions that were actually easier than his childhood summers, act overwhelmed by weather that wouldn't even require a jacket on Earth. But as he thought about it, Marcus realized he was tired of hiding, tired of listening to his friends discuss his species as theoretical monsters, tired of being classified as a sensor error in galactic databases. Maybe it was time for the galaxy to learn about humans. The simulation chamber was larger than Marcus had expected, with adjustable environmental controls and multiple observation stations. His classmates were already suiting up in protective gear designed to help them survive the impossible conditions. Remember, Professor Zethkar announced, this is just 1% of theoretical death world parameters. The moment you feel overwhelmed, activate your emergency beacon. There's no shame in admitting that such conditions are beyond what any reasonable being can endure. Marcus looked at the protective suit he'd been issued. It was designed to help regulate temperature, provide breathing assistance, and offer gravitational support. Basically, it was meant to make 1% Earth conditions survivable for his classmates. He made his decision. Professor, I think I'll try without the suit first. See how standard human physiology handles it. The entire preparation area went silent. Zethkar's 4 eyes widened in what Marcus had learned was Altarian alarm. Rivera, that's inadvisable. Even your stable world physiology shouldn't attempt unprotected exposure to death world conditions. I understand the risks, Professor, but I think it would be valuable data to see how a species from a truly mild world performs. Before anyone could stop him, Marcus walked into the simulation chamber wearing nothing but standard academy exercise clothes. The environmental controls activated and Marcus felt absolutely normal. The gravity increased to what felt like a lazy Sunday morning on Earth. The atmospheric composition shifted to something that reminded him of home. A light breeze began blowing, maybe 15 kilometers per hour, barely enough to rustle leaves. Behind the transparent barrier, he could see his classmates and professor staring in shock. Through the intercom, he heard Zethkar's voice. "Rivera, how do you feel? Any discomfort? Difficulty breathing?" Marcus stretched casually. "I feel fine, Professor. Actually, this is quite pleasant." A light rain began falling, the kind of gentle shower that on Earth might make someone consider bringing an umbrella, but probably wouldn't bother most people. Marcus let it fall on his face, enjoying the familiar sensation. The observation area erupted in alarm chittering and whistling. Through the intercom, "Rivera, you're being exposed to corrosive dihydrogen monoxide precipitation. Are you experiencing tissue damage?" "It's just water, Professor. Feels nice, actually." The simulation ramped up. The wind increased to maybe 30 kilometers per hour, a decent breeze that might make someone put on a light jacket. The temperature dropped to what Marcus estimated was around 5 degrees Celsius. Chilly but hardly dangerous. "This is impossible," he heard Clickstar whisper. "No unprotected being should survive these conditions." Marcus decided to push further. He began jogging lightly around the chamber, his breathing easy despite the toxic atmosphere. The gravity that was supposed to be crushing felt perfectly normal. The deadly weather conditions were actually quite refreshing. "Rivera," Zethkar's voice was tight with concern. "You're exhibiting impossible endurance. The gravity alone should have you pinned to the ground." "I feel great, Professor. Could we maybe increase the parameters a bit? This seems pretty mild." The observation area fell completely silent. Then, to Marcus's surprise, Zethkar began increasing the simulation parameters. The gravity increased, still nowhere near actual Earth gravity, but Marcus could feel the difference now. The wind picked up to maybe 50 kilometers per hour. The temperature dropped further. Lightning began flashing in the artificial sky. Marcus continued jogging, actually enjoying the workout. This was like a mild autumn day in Minnesota. "My God!" Whisper's voice was barely audible through the intercom. He's actually thriving in there." The simulation continued escalating. Rain became a proper downpour. Wind reached speeds that would concern meteorologists on Earth but wouldn't shut down airports. The temperature hit freezing. Thunder rolled overhead. Marcus stopped jogging and stood calmly in the center of the chamber, letting the rain wash over him. Through the observation window, he could see his classmates pressed against the barrier, staring in what could only be described as horrified fascination. "Professor," Marcus called out, "I think we might need to discuss something. Is there somewhere private we could talk after this?" Zethkar's voice was barely a whisper. What are you?" Marcus looked directly at the observation window, meeting his professor's four-eyed gaze. "I'm human, Professor. From Earth. Sol 3. The place your databases classify as a theoretical impossibility." The silence that followed was deafening. Then every alarm in the simulation chamber began screaming at once, and Marcus realized his education was about to become very, very complicated. The Academy's emergency protocols had never been designed for a student casually revealing they were from a theoretical impossibility. Within minutes of Marcus's declaration, the simulation chamber was surrounded by security forces, medical teams, and what appeared to be half the Academy's senior faculty. Marcus found himself in a sterile white room that looked uncomfortably like an interrogation chamber. Across from him sat Professor Zethkar, Academy Director Vorthe K, a massive being that resembled a walking tree, and Dr. Seelan Dra, the Academy's head of xenobiology, who appeared to be made entirely of flowing mercury. "Let me understand this correctly." Director Vorthe K's voice resonated like wind through leaves. "You claim to be from Sol 3, the world our surveys classified as uninhabitable." "Not uninhabitable," Marcus corrected. Just really, really difficult to live on. Dr. Celandra's metallic form rippled with what might have been skepticism. Our scans detected primitive tool users, but the environmental conditions made complex civilization impossible. The gravitational anomaly alone is perfectly normal if you grow up with it, Marcus interrupted. Look, I know this is hard to believe, but Earth Sol 3 is my homeworld. I'm not some theoretical impossibility. I'm just adapted. Professor Zethkar leaned forward, his forearms spread in supplication. Rivera, the conditions you survived in that simulation chamber would kill most galactic species in minutes. The gravity, the atmospheric composition, the weather patterns were actually pretty pleasant, Marcus finished. Professor, that simulation was running at maybe 5% of normal Earth conditions. A gentle spring day where I come from would probably require your entire medical team on standby. The three beings exchanged looks that somehow conveyed volumes despite their completely different facial structures. Prove it, Director Vorthake said simply. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his personal data pad. I've got family photos, historical records, cultural databases. Though I'm guessing you'll want more than that. We'll want everything. Dr. Celandra's form shifted to what Marcus was learning to recognize as intense interest. Medical scans, genetic analysis, psychological evaluation, cultural documentation. Whoa! Marcus held up his hands. I'm willing to cooperate, but I'm still a student here. I have rights, don't I? The silence that followed was telling. Mr. Rivera, Director Vorthake said carefully, you must understand the implications of what you're claiming. If Earth is real, if humans actually exist as they do, it changes everything we know about evolution, adaptation, and galactic civilization. We're not spacefaring yet, Marcus admitted. I mean, technically we are. I'm here after all, but most humans don't even know aliens exist. I was selected for a special program. Selected by whom? Dr. Celandra's voice carried a sharp edge. Marcus realized he was stepping into deeper waters than he'd anticipated. That's classified. Above my clearance level. Another exchange of looks. Mr. Rivera, Professor Zethkar said gently, we're going to need to verify your claims. For the safety of galactic civilization, you understand. I understand you're scared, Marcus replied, and the room's temperature seemed to drop several degrees. You've just learned that what you thought was impossible is not only possible, but sitting right here having a conversation with you. Dr. Celandra's mercury-like form began to flow more rapidly. If your species is real, if they possess even a fraction of the capabilities you've demonstrated, they represent a potential threat unlike anything the galaxy has ever encountered. We're not a threat, Marcus said firmly. We're explorers, scientists, artists. We want to learn, to contribute, to be part of something bigger than ourselves. You say that, Director Vorthake's bark-like skin rustled with agitation. But you come from a world that would forge beings into living weapons. Every human would be a super soldier by galactic standards. Every human is also someone's child, someone's friend, someone's loved one, Marcus countered. We don't solve everything with violence. We have poetry, music, philosophy. We fall in love, we laugh, we cry at sad movies. You also survive conditions that would kill us, Zethkar pointed out. You thrive in gravity that would crush our bones, breathe atmosphere that would poison our systems, and apparently find refreshing what we consider lethal weather patterns. Marcus leaned back in his chair, suddenly exhausted. I'm beginning to see the problem here. You're so focused on our physical capabilities that you can't see past them to who we actually are. Can you blame us? Dr. Celandra asked. From our perspective, your species is a collection of nearly indestructible predators who evolved under conditions so extreme that they exist only in our theoretical models of impossible worlds. And from my perspective, Marcus said quietly, I'm a 22-year-old graduate student who just wanted to study xenobiology and maybe make some friends. I didn't ask to be the scary monster from your nightmares. The room fell silent for several long moments. Finally, Director Vorthake spoke. What do you propose we do, Mr. Rivera? Pretend this conversation never happened? Allow you to continue your studies while harboring this revelation? Marcus thought carefully before answering. I propose you get to know me, really know me, not as a theoretical Deathworld creature, but as Marcus Rivera. Let me prove that humans aren't the monsters you think we are. And if you can't? Professor Zethkar asked softly. Marcus met his professor's four-eyed gaze steadily. Then I guess you'll have learned something important about making assumptions based on fear instead of facts. The three faculty members exchanged another look, and Marcus realized his real education, and humanity's introduction to galactic civilization, was just beginning. Very well, Mr. Rivera, Director Vorthe K said finally. But this process will be comprehensive and closely monitored. Marcus nodded. I wouldn't expect anything less. Just try to remember that I'm still the same person who's been sitting in your classrooms for the past semester. The only thing that's changed is what you know about where I come from. But even as he said it, Marcus suspected that everything had changed, and there would be no going back to the simple days of being just another student at the Galactic Academy.